he made us sound real flash. You know, we're a bit nervous now. But just before we had we were down at the table, our uncle said to us, you know, have you got this? Have you got this right? Well, you know, oh, nah, not now. So here we're just going to share our journey.
Ana, yeah. Kia ora koutou. Yeah. Ngā mihi pahea. Thank you for that. That was an awesome introduction. And ngā mihi wai Māori ropu. It's so cool to be able to come together and just be in wānanga together around wai Māori. So, yeah. Thank you for all the mahi you've put into this. Ko Petar Druskovich tōku ingoa, he ori o Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairoa, Kaitahu, me Pākehā Croatian. I've been the freshwater scientist for Te Kāhui o Rauru for the last year and a half now. And I think that the kōrero we really want to have today is around our journey in the monitoring space. Not necessarily focusing on the actual monitoring we've done, but focusing on the infrastructure we've built around monitoring, how we've conceptualized it, and the tensions that have kind of come about when implementing that. So to start with, I want to focus on this kupu of giving effect, because I've used that quite a bit throughout here. And that kind of formed the starting point for our kōrero around monitoring. And it kind of stemmed from Te Mana o Te Wai. So with Te Mana o Te Wai, we saw quite an explicit shift in ethic for how we talk about wai Māori, at least in a legislative and policy sense. So rather than focusing on the economic outcomes, it is now the why that is first and foremost. And equally important to that is this kupu of give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. So traditionally, in policy and legislation, we've seen in old iterations of national policy statement, we've seen kupu like recognise or, things that don't really mean anything, things that mean go have a yarn and then do nothing with that kōrero. With give effect, we see that kōrero needs to be implemented throughout that structure. It needs to be, tangibly represented in the structures we build. And our kōrero is that can we push that further to say giving effect to Ngā Rauru values? So we're not just saying we want our values to be recognised or understood. We're saying that any structure built in the Ngā Rauru rohe needs to be underpinned by those values. They need to be tangibly present. And there's a tension in that I feel like I should recognise, because we are using a very Pākehā kupu and give effect, you know. I think it could easily be argued that, you know, we're recognising a false mana there and using that kupu. But I think the flip side of that is we're using kupu traditionally used to ostracise and keep Māori out of the space against a Pākehā system. So like Te Mana o Te Wai symbolises a flip in dynamic, our use of give effect also symbolises that same flip in dynamic. So stemming from the give effect to Ngā Rauru values, our first port of call was kind of what tools do we have in our kete to do that from a monitoring point of view? And luckily for us, there are heaps as. Kaupapa Māori assessment tools have been rife in Aotearoa, the likes of Ian Ruru, Gail Tipper, Sean Awateri have cracked on with this mahi and produced really awesome things that we can grab onto and use in the Ngā Rauru rohe. So it started with sort of an explicit exploration of these tools. And then secondly, we kind of pulled on cultural impact assessments. So the kōrero we have today is not a new kōrero. It is a kōrero that is decades long and has been captured in many different vessels. And cultural impact assessments kind of provide this snapshot throughout this process of environmental degradation where this kōrero has been captured, those tensions have been captured. And if we want to have a long-lasting yarn about why care, about pai our care, it is important that we don't disregard the kōrero already given. So these formed a really strong basis, and when we were thinking about what does giving effective values look like, drawing on the tensions and whatnot there. So on the back of that, on the back of all the tools we have, all the kōrero we have through cultural impact assessments, and on the back of many wānanga and yarns with uri, we kind of highlight these 3 points. There are more points in this, but these are kind of 3 I want to focus on, particularly the last one. Monitoring should be by wānau for wānau. So we should always be pushing for monitoring systems to be moved away from regional councils, crown entities, and towards mana whenua. Monitoring should be continually contextualised by uri, and what I mean by that is we want the figures produced from our monitoring to mean something to people. While we might end up having reductive figures sometimes in some capacity, there needs to always be a kōrero behind that. Those figures need to mean something. They need to not just be data points. And then finally, the last one that we really want to hone into today is more focus needs to be placed around the governance of monitoring. Yeah, and I think what I mean by that is when we monitor, we are in many ways undertaking a political action or an action of activism. There is an assertion attached to monitoring in that there is an assertion of rights to be in place. There is an assertion of rights to care. There is assertion of rights to those relationships. And that is something that regional councils and crown agencies have traditionally monopolised. So our kōrero is that we need to pull back a little bit and think about what does our governance structure around that monitoring actually look like. And there's a lot of tensions in that. There's a lot of difficulties in that because crown agencies are going to be a part of that in one way or another, and that causes a lot of concern. And I'll pass over to Jude now, who's going to kōrero to that a little bit more. Ka pai. There's your clicker.
You can do the clicker. I'll just tell you where to do the clicker. How do we give effect to our values? Just like yous. We don't do anything different. We just probably need to share a little bit more about what we do. We've done it for a long time. And we're going to play the long game, because that's really what it is when we're playing with the regional councils and the councils. We play that long game. Asserting our values and asserting our continuing positive relationship that doesn't cater for our needs, really. They aren't explicit, our needs. They're not at the forefront and the tensions are there. So how do we do that? Because these relationships are hard. We know that crown relationships are even harder. Partnerships that need to be maintained. When we're talking to our treaty partners, we treat it as an arranged marriage where we're in our little team. And I'm looking at this clock over here, and this arranged marriage is quite good because we're still on 15 minutes, so we can go a little bit longer. The timer's not working. So we don't have to rush this marriage. We need to slow up, pull back, and just cruise along. Just like a marriage, you begin with a first date, well, you know, that wink across the room and that connection together. You say kia ora. No he koe. What are you up to? And just hang out for a little bit. That's what we're doing with our regional councils and our partners, is that, hello, we just want to get to know you a little bit first. They say out loud, they come with a list. You don't come with a list on your first date, your checklist. You just come and say hi to me. Let's just get to know each other first. So get your list away. Maybe we'll say that on the second date. Stop, slow up and have a cup of tea. A mate said to me, 1,000 cups of tea, and we've all heard that saying, is going to make it happen. So it is about those relationships. Just have a cup of tea first, let's get to know each other, and then we'll go from there. We have, next to our awa, our backbone in our iwi is Waitotara awa. Next to that awa is Tapuaro. It's a lake, and it's right on our coast, and it's right at our river mouth. It's responsible. One of our partners is responsible. We may have got it back at settlement, but we don't have it in name. Like, it's their name at the gate, but technically it's ours. Well, in this date, can you clean up your mess before I come home? Can you make sure that the water's not rising in our lake because you have left a 1.7 k sand dune that is not planted? Therefore, it's affecting our coast, it's affecting our river mouth, it's affecting our lake, which is affecting our groundwater. Come on. Before I come home, or before we come to this to the end of this date, you're going to tidy up your house first, because if I bring my mum and dad to meet you, they don't want to know you. So it's little conversations like that. That's how we pull up with them. Please stop. Have a little think about it. Would you like it if the roles were reversed? Do you think that's a really good start to the marriage? Nah. When they start digging their heels in, because, sometimes they don't want to clean up. They just want to go and do their own thing, not tidy things. Well, we go slow on other things. Okay, then if you're going to slow up on that stuff, I'm not going to sign off your consent, so I'm going to go real slow. So there's little trade-offs and there's little things that we can do in there, because, we want to do this together. If you want to do this together, that other department down there that we talk to and we're working with also, we'll shut that off. You don't want to play like that. That's not a good marriage. That's just playing mind games. Let's stop the games. Let's just work together and keep on going. Thank you. We come back to the marriage. We're courting. You got a boyfriend, kind of like you, had your first date, and we keep moving forward. We want to be able to communicate and talk to each other. My auntie was really, really hearty in regards to that, and her and Uncle Mike were a force. That they would push back all the time on things that weren't tika and that weren't right. We are lucky. There's a power in the collective. In Taranaki, we have a Pōtaiao who is working with the regional council, and she speaks for us, she writes for us, she's the policy brain in our iwi. But we also support her by being able to come together as Pōtaiao and sit at that table with her when she needs us to push hard. When they're not listening to us, well, we're lucky. We have our tumus, both tumus, our chairs, our tumu wakarai and our tumu wakahaere, to come and sit behind us again. So the power of collective, that's when your cousins come and your aunties and your uncles and all of those, when the relationship's not quite going right. So let's fix it all up. Those are the other things that we can push back on too. With us comes an entire iwi and our cousins. Please look after this relationship, because you're going to need it, because this marriage, you haven't put the ring on my finger yet, but you're nearly getting there. Just do it right. We just want to keep up the effort with the kōrero and the relationships. That's why the relationships for us are really important when we're with the councils, when we're with any of the partners that we're working with, so that we can give effect to our freshwater values. Just listen, sit down, have another cup of tea, and let's get on with it. Next one. What are the pathways that we're carving out for our moko? What are the ripples in the water that make it easier for them? That's what this stuff is all about. That's what coming to these things are all about. We listen to each other's stories, we listen to each other's kōrero, and how do you play with your relationships? Let's give some tips and tricks to each other while we're out there networking over the next 2 days. share our values and share what we do in order to maintain those relationships. Because we've all been playing the long game for a very long time. It's just, what are some new tricks that you use with the changing dynamics that are out there? I'm going to pass it back to Peter to finish us off.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, because I don't know how long have we been talking? Are we way over?
Actually, there is a little time right
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, one more minute. Aroha mai. So, for our monitoring framework, just to wrap up, these are kind of the three strands that we've been focusing on, and that, tiaki winawa kind of focusing on land use and ensuring that our uri are actively involved in that process, actively involved and represented in that consent process and land use process. Mai te rangi ki te kopu o te winawa mai e uta kitai, our rangi te Valley of Papatūānuku from mountain to sea, ensuring that we have a good picture on the health of our rohe, and then the Ngā Mahi a Ngā Te Puna, which is ensuring those practices are continued, ensuring those connections with wai are continued. So when we have the overarching theme of these is that they are all relational. Our focus is relational monitoring. And like we spoke about the kiti with kaupapa Māori monitoring tools and cultural impacts assessments and stuff, it's important to recognise that we are essentially having a hauora conversation when we yarn about taiao and taiao care. We cannot have that yarn without yarning about the care of our people as well. And we have an entire kiti around kaupapa Māori theory, our wanaunga in the education and health space who have been pushing this kaupapa for years. There's no reason we shouldn't be drawing on this as well. And this is just kind of a little snapshot of some ma'i that Sandy Kerr did, which is kind of an assessment of evaluation of kaupapa Māori, how your approach is going. And this is kind of an important one in terms of, ensuring we're on the right track. Aroha mai for going over time. Kia ora, thank you heaps.